Okay, in this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to start by factoring polynomials. And so we have some rules to look at. So the first thing you always want to do is you always want to look for the greatest common factor. By doing that, you're making things smaller, which makes it easier to do. Also, if you don't take out the greatest common factor, then you actually have to factor again later. Because remember, in order for everything to be factored, there has to be nothing else that can go into anything. Okay? And so there's a little bit of a rule that I have here. So determine the two factors that multiply to give you C. So we want to find the factors that multiply to give you C. So when you do this, you want to write them in order. 1 times 40. The next number that goes into 40 is 2. So 2 times 20. The next number is 3, but 3 doesn't go into 40. So then 4. That's 4 and 10. And then 5 and 8. If you go in order, you're less likely to miss them, and you know that you're done when you have two numbers close to each other. The only other numbers left that I haven't gone through are 6 and 7, and neither of those go into 40. So I know that these are my factors. So the next thing you're going to do is I'm going to see which ones add or subtract based on what that sign is to give you the middle number. So since I'm adding, my numbers that add to give me 13 are 5 and 8. I don't ever really worry about the sign of this until later. I just think, okay, I have to add two numbers to get 13. The only way I can add two numbers to get to 13 is if they're a positive 5 and a positive 8. Because 5 plus 8 is 13. And remember, the reason that is because if you actually FOILed this out or distributed it out, I'd get x squared, 8x, 5x, and 40. And so those together give us that 13x that we were looking for. So that's the process we're going to follow. You're going to find your factors of C that either add or subtract to give you the middle number. Okay? We're going to come and fill in these rules after we do some examples. So let's go down and look at our examples. Hold on. Okay, so I need to find my factors of 10. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5. They're going to add to give me 7. Well, the only two numbers here that add to give me 7 are 2 and 5. So I put a 2, I put a 5. Now, the order of the two doesn't matter. What's going to matter is the signs. The only way I can get a positive 7 is if they're both positives. All right, let's do this next one. Factors of 12. So 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and then 3 and 4. And again, I have to add to give a 7. I'm ignoring that it's a negative. Right now, I'm just adding to get a 7. And the numbers that add to give a 7 are 3 and 4. So I have a 3 and a 4. Now, this is where I have to think about the sign. The only way I can get a negative 7 is if they are both negative. Because a negative 3 plus a negative 4 is a negative 7. The reason this works... Excuse me, the reason this works also is because negative 3 times negative 4 is a positive 12. Okay, so let's look at this next one. Okay, so factors of 21, 1 and 21, 3 and 7. And so I'm adding to get 10. The only numbers that add to give 10 are 3 and 7. X with 3. X was 7, and the only way I can get a positive 10 is if they're both positives. So what we've had is we've had 3 examples that have an adding. So let's go in and fill in our rules. Okay? If the last sign is a plus, both signs are the same. The only way you can get a positive adding is if it's a positive times a positive or a negative times the negative. And then you find the sign, it's the same as the middle number. So if I have a negative right there with a plus here, right, 2 blanks, that tells me that they're both going to be negative. If I have a plus here that tells me that they're both going to be pluses. So that's a little rule that will help you. Whenever you have a plus sign at the end, your two signs in the middle are the same. They're not necessarily both plus, but they are the same. All right, let's look at what happens when if I have a minus at the end. Okay, so for this one, we're going to find our factors of 22, 1 and 22, 2 and 11. No other numbers go into 22. And this time I'm finding the factors that subtract to give me 9. Well, 2 and 11 subtract to give me 9. So I'm going to put a 2. I'm going to put 11. Now here's the thing. Whenever you subtract, remember our integer rules is same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. So I'm going to subtract. Am I going to do 11 minus 2 or 2 minus 11? Which of those is going to give me a negative 9 that I'm looking for? It's this one because the 11's bigger. So if you notice, the 11 is bigger, so that means I have to have the minus in front of the 11. And this was a positive 2. So the bigger number takes the sign of the middle number. All right, let's look at this one. 1 and 20. 2 and 10, 4 and 5. I have to subtract to get a 1. There's nothing there, but that's a 1. So looking at those numbers, the numbers that subtract to give me a 1 are 4 and 5. So I got a 4 and I have a 5. The only way I can get a positive 1, is it going to be 5 minus 4 or 4 minus 5? The only way I can get a positive 1 is if it's this one, 5 minus 4. So that tells me the negative has to be with the 4, and the 5 is positive. All right, one last example. This one right here, you notice it looks like a binomial because there's nothing in the middle. Whenever you have an x squared and there's nothing in the middle, what you could do is you could say that there's a 0x there. And then now I do my factors of 25. That subtract to give me nothing. Well, that's 5 and 5. And it doesn't matter which is which because they're both 5s. One's going to have to be positive and one's going to have to be negative. Okay? All right, so now let's look at the sign, the last rule here. If the last rule is a minus, then the signs are different. And the middle takes the sign of the middle number. Okay. All right, that's it. But remember, follow this process. List your factors in order. Figure out if you have to add or subtract to get the middle number.